I guess I should welcome you to the channel. This is...
Hi.
Kate? Kate or Catherine?
Kate. Yeah, just Catherine's a bit more literary, so that's kind of what I was going for.
I like that. It's only because I've mentioned you in my wrap-up and a couple of other videos. Whenever we talk about Cruel Prince or any other fantasy that I've forced you to read, and then you've been like, okay, well now I've read the entire series, I've referred to you as Kate. And then obviously your Twitter's Catherine.
Yes, but my Twitter handle is Kate Mac Author.
That helps. So I just want to make it clear so I don't call you Kate and then no one can find you. But it's fine because I'll put your link in the description box. So, Kate.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me about your book?
Okay, so my book, The Rose and the Thorn, is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. The reason I wrote it is because even though I love the original story so much, which I'm sure you do too, I find it a little bit problematic that the whole story starts with imprisonment. Can't get a girl unless I imprison her.
And not only that, but I'm imprisoned in the first place because I'm not a nice person.
Precisely. But actually, if you read the original story by, I think her name's Villeneuve, Madame Gabrielle Suzanne something de Villeneuve. It's a really long name. She's got like 6 of them. So
I was going to say, I think you've got, Gabrielle Suzanne Bardot de Villeneuve.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Thank you for making it nice and easy, having it literally on the first page.
You are welcome. But in her original one, which is actually 100 pages long, so it's a novella, not a short story, the Beast is imprisoned because he refused the marriage proposal of a wicked fairy. So actually, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy, yeah.
Yeah, but obviously imprisoning a young girl...
He's been done dirty by Disney.
He's been a little bit done dirty by Disney. But imprisoning a young girl is not generally the best way to start an epic romance.
It's not a way to start any romance. Really.
And while I will rally against anyone who's like, it's Stockholm Syndrome, because of course she maintains her independence, which is really important, I still feel like for the relationship to truly feel equal, I needed to remove that element completely. So that was the first thing that I was like, no, that's got to go. He cannot imprison her, so she's imprisoned by the laws of fairy magic instead, and she's locked there for 6 months, and obviously that is enough time to grow to love a human and a beast who is secretly a human. So yeah, that was the main thing for me. Yeah,
I liked that because yours wasn't the only Beauty and the Beast retelling that I read this month. The other one was Of Curses and Kisses.
Yes, I've heard about this one.
Have you read any of it yet?
No, is that the one with the cerebral palsy or is that a different one?
I don't know because
that would be a different one.
If it is, I didn't get that far.
I think that's A Curse So Dark and Lonely.
Yes,
so.
That is, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Similar title.
That's on my TBR, but I've not read it
yet.
Wait,
no, this is is it the Indian version? Yes, okay.
That basically feels like the author was like, I'm a huge Disney fan and I'm just going to rewrite the Disney without actually rewriting any of it. I will get so shady if I start talking about this. I really didn't like it. But I think I read that one first because I was like, well, I've read this before. I've read snippets of this before. So I wanted to give myself enough break before I read it to actually appreciate it. Because my other fear was that I'd read it and then start skipping chunks because I'd read them before.
Yeah,
I find rereading books really tricky.
Yeah.
I know
this bit. I'll just go to the bit that I don't know.
Yeah.
Or the bit I like more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really like that. And I like the fact that, especially coming from a fantasy background, you have clearly spent a lot of time thinking about your magic world.
So much time thinking about the magic world, yeah.
So have you got like notebooks of ideas and stuff that you...
Oh my gosh, well, I used to actually teach fairy tales as part of the A-level curriculum, so I've got an annotated book of fairy tales, which someone's already annotated for me, which was fantastic. So I won't say I've read all of them, because there are literally thousands out there, but I've read so many, and there's so many elements that I drew into the story, and there's a lot of like lines from the original. There are a couple of really tiny nods to the Disney version, which I'm sure you picked up on, but they're like minimal. They're more like Easter eggs than...
I think that's the thing, because it felt like you were throwing them in, not because you're like, let's put it in, but more because you're like, I enjoyed that, and I wanted to pull on that because like that's something that I like. And I think that was probably my issue with the other one, is it felt like she was throwing them in because the audience is gonna notice.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know when you see films that are almost like a homage to another, and they've got those little Easter eggs where it's like, okay, well they clearly enjoyed that aesthetic, so they've put that in, or they enjoyed that character reference, so they've put that in, as opposed to like the Scary Movie franchise, which is if we throw enough references in, maybe we can make
Yeah,
it
it's kind of, you're hit on the head with a frying pan rather than gently nudged with a spoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas this is gently nudged with a spoon, and I think it works because like there are some passages. Obviously, I know I had a quick look through your Goodreads reviews. There are quite a few people that say obviously it's quite a slow. There are slow parts, but I think that kind of it gives you reflection time.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people when they're writing their first novel are desperate to put as much plot into it as possible. And I was definitely one of those people.
I think that's a terrible mistake. Like this, I mean, although this is the first one I've published, it's not the first thing that I've written. And I've made like a lot of mistakes in there, which thankfully didn't make it into that book.
Yeah.
And that is one of them. Like there is no racing ahead. It's supposed to be slow. Because actually that's also one of the issues I've had with all of the retellings before. I'm like, people don't fall in love this quickly, usually.
Yeah.
They definitely don't fall in love this quickly when there are some fundamental biological differences between the two leads.
Yes. And I think, because like, I've been slighting romance right up until my wrap-up, where I realised that I'd read 4 romances and I only disliked one of them, which I think, you know, maybe I need to take back all of the horrible things that I've said, but I think the reason I like this is because it is a slow burn romance. It feels more authentic. I have had thousands of crushes, nothing's ever happened from them, and the people that I have had a long-term romance with, it has been a slow burn. It's been over time. And I think trying to encapsulate time in less than 500 pages is always going to be tricky.
Yeah.
But I think also
It is less than 500 pages.
There you go, that's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying. But like, I think the other thing is obviously you can see their relationship reflected in their surroundings as well. And I think that is just so cleverly done.
Oh, thank you. I was going for clever.
You're like, no, tick. Like, excellent. No, because like I think that for me, the reason I like people like Naomi Novik and Philip Pullman is their settings. And people can get quite bogged down in description, maybe not enjoy it as much, but for me, I think you can tell a lot about where the story's about to go from the setting.
Yes.
Because it's the scenery. It's
I mean,
the
at
kind
least
of,
if the author is, and I hope I am, doing a decent job.
Yeah.
Like, it's not description for description's sake. It's, you know, it's pathetic fallacy. It's there to set the tone and the mood and to show how someone is feeling internally, rather than being like, I am sad.
Yeah.
Because I don't write children's books.
I think even if you did, like, good children's books don't have I am sad. It has a kid sat with its knees scrunched up under a cloud, and you know, you have the description of it rather than I am this. Speaking of the I am this bit though, what I found really fascinating about yours is it's present tense first person.
Yes.
So it's really immediate.
Yes, I agonised over what tense and what person to do it in, because initially it was a third person past tense, but actually the retrospective narrative didn't work for me. It seemed too cliched, and it seemed like, oh, we're just going to get to the end and she's going to be telling the story to her children, and I was like, that's boring and that's dull. And plus, if she's got that retrospective narrative, like, obviously she already knows all of the things that are happening, and you have to believe as the author, as the reader, that she doesn't know, because otherwise it's just too obvious.
Yeah, I think the book would have been half as long if she worked it out. And this is the thing, the audience does, because the audience knows the story. So like,
story.
It's about this far through, and we're like, no, we know where this is going. Or like, he says like one nice thing to her or something, and we're like, he's gonna break it. It's gonna happen. She's gonna fall in love with him. And I think that's really lovely. That, and I think maybe that's where people get some frustration, because I'm really bad for it in real life, let alone when I'm reading fiction, and I'm like, oh, it's so obvious you two like each other. And I'm just like, just kiss.
Well, that's actually why I brought in the fairies, because they sort of, the audience voice in at the second half of the novel, when they're just like, just do it, just
Ariel
do it.
is
Come
just incredible.
Yeah, she's probably my favourite character.
I think that was clear from reading it.
This is always the case. Like, no matter how much I might like the main characters, I always end up loving like a side character, because usually they kind of write themselves, those ones. Like, you put so much effort into like the main two, but there's always this like sassy side character that just, you just love them.
I feel like it's almost cheating, because I find that I put myself in that character more than I put myself in any of the other characters. So that person is more honest.
I am not a sassy immortal fairy.
You might as well be.
Sassy.
Well, we were discussing your mortality earlier. You're definitely going to be immortal. So.
Yes. I just frankly refuse to die.
I mean, if you refuse to do something, it's not going to happen.
It's true. I mean, my grandma's 97. She's doing a very good job so far.
My great grandmother lived until she was like 102.
Yeah.
So we're going to be old ladies together. You know this, right?
Admittedly, my grandma is now basically a wrinkle in a pint glass. She's like this tiny little prune that you could just pick up and like pop in a glass. She is that small, but she's still killing it.
I can't imagine you ever being that kind of contained. Like, this little person, like, no, it's never going to happen.
Force of nature still.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so what's the nicest thing someone said about this book so far?
I couldn't put it down, which is more than one person. I think as authors, that's what we really want to know, is that someone completely and totally lost themselves in a world that we've created. Because I know for me as a reader, that's the best feeling. Like, I just need to read this book to its conclusion. So yeah, it's probably, I couldn't put it down, but it's also people, there was one particular one I remember that said, I know how the story ends, but I really wanted to know how this story ended. And I was like, okay, so definitely a retelling worth telling then.
Yeah, because I think that's the trickiest bit with retellings, and I think they can get a lot of flack for it if it is a kind of standard ending. But it has to be your ending. But then this is wholeheartedly your story. Like, as much as it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, I think because you've based it on the original fairy tale rather than the Disney version, and I think a lot of people that have done retellings, a variety of them,
I'm
they've
just
based
a
it on
bit
Disney
too
ones.
coloured by that.
Yeah. And I think, it's obvious. I remember you and I going to see the live action remake.
So good!
And the fact that you did your hair in your Beauty and the Beast, and you wore your Beauty and the Beast dress as well.
Yeah, I think possibly my Beauty and the Beast necklace.
Yes, you did. You did your wearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you had a slightly different one. I think you had a rose.
Oh, a silver rose?
Yeah.
I have two.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. If you got to be a fan of your own
You do.
brand.
You do.
But I loved that. And yeah, let's talk about the films then, just for a second, because we really like talking about the films. Which film do you prefer?
Oh, honestly, I have agonised over this, and I cannot work out which one I do prefer. Because obviously, like, they expand Belle's role in the live action one. I think Emma Watson does a terrific job, like, really showing that sort of like stubborn quality of her character.
Yeah.
And they expand on the relationship between the two of them. But there's one teeny little thing about it which I can't stand, which is they attempted to fix the timeline problem, but inadvertently they've said the whole thing takes place in about a week, and that for me irritates, because the original was quite non-specific as to how long it was taking, and in my head it was weeks, maybe months, etc.
And it could have been because she was like, even like when there were song changes, there were costume changes and things like that, little things that show a passing of time as opposed to yeah,
so like for that element it feels more of a slow burn in the original cartoon. But there are some more beautiful elements to the second one, and I love Evermore. I know
Evermore is incredible.
I know there were some people that were really disappointed that we didn't get the Beasts If I Can't Love Her from the musical, because it's a very similar sort of song, but I just thought Evermore worked so beautifully. And I particularly like how it matched up with his earlier line where he was like, all that romance and pining. And then I'm like, 40 minutes later.
Like, character development.
Romance and pining.
I think that's the thing, is like, for me, there were loads of things that I liked individually about the live action remake, but it just couldn't compare for me to the animation.
The nostalgia quality as well.
Yeah, but also like the stuff they did with the Beast, like, I feel like none of my ideas on this are original, because the second I got home, I watched the Lindsay Ellis Thanks I Hate It video essay. And it was really hard not to completely agree with her. They take all the charm from the Beast.
Yes.
And like the idea that it's his idea to let her out of the prison
yes,
and
that
to actually
was
take her to the
problematic.
library and stuff like that. And they make him really problematic. And I get why, but I found that really frustrating.
I still like Dan Stevens enough that I've finally forgiven him for the Downton Abbey fiasco.
Oh,
so.
I boycotted it. I've still not watched a single episode since, and my mum nearly bought me the incomplete box set for Christmas, and I was like, no, I'll never watch it again. You know why I was so annoyed? Is they had built up to it for 8 seasons, and then
it felt like 8 seasons. It wasn't that many, but it really felt
it was
like
probably like 2. But they built up for it so long, and it was like the perfect slow burn romance, because they had to learn to be nice to each other, and in that way it was very Pride and Prejudice, and I love that.
Yes.
Because it's like, there's nothing wrong with either person except they don't understand the other, and I am all for a romance like that. I just don't seem to find any in modern writers don't seem to want to publish those, which is fine. They did all of that, and then they didn't even kill him on screen.
Yeah.
They showed him driving down the road, and then the car crash, and she's just sat there waiting for him.
And also for me, from a storytelling perspective, they killed off Sybil in something very similar. So Sybil died on the day that her baby was born. Matthew died on the day whose babe was born. Spoilers here, people, but
yeah, we probably should have started with that.
and then of course the third Crowley sister has a baby and the dad's died before she's even born, and I'm just like, nobody has this much bad luck.
I hope not. Like, and it's just, and I appreciate that obviously whenever it's a drama, there is going to be an awful lot of bad luck and good luck thrown on a family for the story's sake.
Yeah. But when it's too similar, that's not good
Yeah, it's
storytelling.
the same storyline over and over again, and I just felt like it was a real cheap shot.
Yes. Cheap is exactly the word I would use.
Yeah.
Damn you, Dan Stephen. Damn
But yeah, so I've boycotted all of Downton ever since. I haven't seen the film either.
The film is fantastic, to be fair.
I love it, like, yeah, I boycotted to a point.
To a point, I just had to. It was such a delightful experience.
Is it good?
Yeah, I mean, it's Maggie Smith
Mm-hmm.
doing some real method acting. Literally everything she said was gold. Even like the sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever stuff that she says, I'm like, I don't agree with you, but the delivery was fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with Downton is she'd say some stuff and you're like, oh, but she, for me, would have the quickest turnaround. Once it affected her anyway.
Or her family.
Or her family, and I think I love that because she has this really great way of just kind of going like that, and I'm like, oh, you've realised. There it is.
One of my favourite moments is when Isabel Crawley's like, I'll take that as a compliment, and she's like, must have said it wrong.
Yeah, she's such a bitch.
Brilliant.
I love it. Sorry. I was doing really well not swearing this entire video, but there we go. I've broken it. Okay, we've got 3 more minutes left before the camera dies. So I'm just trying to think. I had a whole bunch of questions that I was going to ask.
And then we got distracted with Downton Abbey. It happens.
It happens. Do you have something you wish you could change about this, or is it kind of in your mind? No, you've finished it now. That's it.
There's sort of a yes and no quality there, which is like sometimes, you know, you read reviews and they're like, oh, it's a bit lengthy, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should have trimmed it down. But then there's equally, if not more, reviews saying I really like the slow burn element to it. So there's that. It's not necessarily like an element because I couldn't change this without changing the entire story. But especially having just read the Folk of the Air by Holly Black, I'm just like, I actually really kind of like the I don't like you storytelling element.
Yeah.
So I'm like, do I need to do another story where they don't like each other to begin with? Because obviously they very much do. She's a little bit more reluctant, but he's like the sweetest, gentlest character ever. And I'm like, maybe it would be more fun if he was broody.
But I think it works because it was different. I think if he'd been broody, everyone would have expected that. But the fact that he's this
been
beast
done
who
too
is
much.
just big old goofball, who is just desperately trying to make everyone happy and is very aware that it all kind of relies on him convincing someone to love him, is lovely. It's a lovely story, and I'm glad because I feel like sometimes I'll say to someone, "Oh, that's lovely," and they go, because I feel like lovely can be almost like a barbed compliment.
Yeah.
But I really mean that because I think they are lovely characters, and even Rose, for all of her sass and snark and like I don't want to be here, like even she has really lovely qualities and really like human qualities. Who would play them in a film?
Oh God, I hate this question because the characters to me kind of look like their own people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't place another person like into them. Like it just doesn't work for me. Like oh gosh, can you envision any actors?
I mean, I'd put Adam Driver in any role, any male role.
Actually, Adam Driver would make not a bad thought.
Because he's actually like, I feel like because he's played soft boys as well as broody boys. I feel like he'd be. I mean, he's just amazing. He can turn his hand to anything.
Actually, yeah, no, I can see that.
You can see it, and then I should play Rose. That's the case.
I would like to play Margaret because I feel like I've got about the right sort of facial features for her, and she's just like, you know, this sort of governess type character and all prim and proper. And when I'm not being,
You're not prim and proper.
I can be for acting's sake. Look, watch me.
Acting. What is this? This is an apple.
Yeah, I feel like physically I'm probably the most like her and probably too old to play any of the other cast, alas, alack.
Okay, brief bedroom interlude. Whilst editing, I realised that I hadn't actually explained, when we go back into the video, why is it a weird angle? So Kate is a single mum, and at one point baby needed to wake up from his nap and started crying, so we hung out with him for about 20 minutes, and when I put the camera back I didn't realise that the camera had tilted backwards. So rather than having the nice square layout that we had in the first 20 minutes, we had the tops of our heads. Now what Kate talks about is really interesting, so I'm keeping the clip in, but if you're wondering why all of a sudden there's a lot more of her wall and a lot less of her face, that's why. We then filmed the end of it, and I'd realised by this point and fixed it. And it's only when I'm editing it now that I realised I didn't actually say anything on the day to explain it, so that's why I'm doing it now. So, back to the video. So, let's talk about the fact, I've got a tea this time as well, out of nowhere. Let's talk about the fact that you are a single mum and a teacher and a writer.
Yeah, it's quite a lot.
That's a long old resume.
Yeah. So obviously the key to getting the writing done is very, very specific targets. So my generic one, which I use most often, is 500 words from between the hours of 7 and 8, which is straight after I put the baby to bed. And if I've not reached it by then, it doesn't matter. But actually 500 words isn't a lot.
It's a page or so, isn't it?
It's about a page, yeah. And often by the time you've made yourself write 500 words, you're like, oh, I quite like this.
You get into the rhythm of it by that
point. And you get into this rhythm precisely. And even if I finish a scene, I sometimes say to myself, right, I'll just have the sentence starter for the one that I'm doing tomorrow. And then before you know it, you've written the sentence starter and a paragraph and maybe a few notes of what you're going to do tomorrow. So I quite often would go over that 1 hour, but I'd also do it like little and often. So, you know, when the baby was down for a nap on the weekends, I'm like, yeah, just do a little bit here, a little bit there. And it really worked because I wrote my latest novel in 3 months.
That's incredible.
Yeah, The Rose and the Thorn took me 6 years, on and off. There was
Yeah.
years when I did like nothing on it. It was just gathering metaphorical dust somewhere on my hard drive. But yeah, 3 months because I was really, really strict with myself. And it's not bad. You know, when you finish a first draft, you're like, well, that was shocking, but I'll fix that when it comes round to edits. And then when it did come round to edits, I was like,
Did you find that it was easier because you weren't as hard on yourself? Because I feel like when it's your first book, and like you said, it took 6 years. When I first met you, you hadn't just started writing it. You had your idea, and you had the baby of a draft that I think I read. I think we were sat at MacDonald's, and you showed it to me on your phone.
Quite possibly.
And I read
That sounds
it.
like something we did.
Yeah, like I think we'd gone to the cinema. And there'd been like 3 or 4 of us, and then you and I had gone to McDonald's afterwards, and you showed me the first draft. And obviously your writing has come such a long way. Did you find it easier with this most recent book?
So much easier.
Because you just weren't as hard on yourself.
I wasn't as hard on myself, but also I'd learned so much from doing the first one. So I'd learned mistakes about my process, both for writing and an editing point of view. I was aware of flaws that I didn't know I had. I was really lucky to sort of win a mini competition on Twitter to have my work, the first 15,000 words, professionally edited. And it was a fantastic experience. And she said, like, oh, like moving forward with your writing style, you need to be careful of this, this, and this. And I'd never even thought of those before. And I really took those on board. And so that actually helped with the editing process because it was less things I was mopping up.
Yeah, that's cool. So what is this new book about then?
Okay, so the new book is called The Phoenix Project. It's a trilogy. The first one is called Book 1, Flight, and obviously there is some phoenix symbology in there, but there is no actual phoenix. It's a sci-fi.
There are no phoenixes.
There are no phoenixes in The Phoenix Project. It's a sci-fi dystopian novel. It's about a genetically engineered girl who's raised to be a super soldier, and when she's 13 years old, she escapes from the lab that made her, along with a handful of her siblings. They're not really related. And they make it to this city called Luca. And Luca and all the other cities in this dystopian future are very much like, in order to survive, you have to be strong. So anybody that has like physical anomalies or sometimes even like mental abnormalities are just shipped off to this slum city on the outskirts. And obviously that's great for her because she gets to hide in sort of plain sight, but it's not a great future. And there's a lot of people that are quite like, yeah, I don't like living this way. So she joins a rebellion to fight against this corrupt government under the proviso that should they ever locate the place where she came from and have the manpower to do so, they will help her take it down for good because she wants to free all the rest that didn't escape with her.
Very exciting stuff. What's the key differences between writing fantasy and writing science fiction for you?
For me, I would say sci-fi's harder because you've got to be a little bit more realistic. Like, there's no wave of magic wand and everything is fixed at the end. So there was a lot of, I need to actually do some research.
So more research involved, yeah.
So much more research. Now, obviously, it's set in the future and who knows where technology is going to be at that point. So some points are purposefully vague because I don't want it to be in like 5 years. This technology is going to be completely obsolete because we don't use cars anymore. We drive around on genetically engineered lizards.
Oh, that's a future I want to see. Could you imagine? It must be better for the environment.
It would be so much better for the environment. So we don't know what the future is going to bring. So some of it is deliberately vague. Obviously, you have to mention that they're using cars or trains. And
because it has to feel almost what's the word, like humanoid.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that. I'm quite lucky that my father's ex-military, so there was a lot of me calling up saying, Dad, could you just tell me how long it would take to choke someone into unconsciousness, please? Which his response would inevitably be, is this fictional?
Is this for a book or do I need to help you kill someone?
It's like, are you doing this right now? Yes, I am choking someone one-handedly. I'm going to put you on speaker.
I've got you on loudspeaker. How long do I need to hold him in the nook of my elbow?
Yeah, so there was a lot of that and asking me about like explosives and him saying like, I'm attacking a building, again, literally or metaphorically, darling. How do I go about it?
Yeah.
Is this plan that I've come up with like feasible? Because it's just a lifetime of watching war movies with my dad going, it's not how they would do it.
Yeah, I mean, with my book, I spent a lot of time harassing any and all police officers that I've had as contacts to be like, how would you respond to it? Like, Hannah, do we actually need to help you get off of a...
Yes. Like, obviously with fiction, I think you're allowed a little bit of creative license, but you do not want readers to be reading it thinking that is ridiculous. Like,
they need to trust you.
Precisely.
If you're suspending their disbelief, you're suspending it for a reason.
Yeah.
So I recently read, have you read The Power by Naomi Alderman? Incredible stuff. And it posits this idea that this world, if women suddenly had the ability to control electricity and shock each other from something within them, how would they use it? And what would the world...
I can think of a few ways.
Well, this is the thing. It's horrible, but it's so grounded in science and reality and real people that you can see them, you can hear them, that when really awful things happen, or things that you're like, that's not realistic, you just fall into step with it because you're like, oh, but this isn't real, is it? This isn't actually happening. It is actually happening, but it's awful. But I think you need to train your audience beforehand before you get to that. And I think some sci-fi and some fantasy stories fall at the first hurdle because they go, here's dragons, and you're like, but you've not given us anything else about the world, so why should I believe? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And I think like world building is one of the hardest things for people to do effectively, and there's been many a fantasy book that I've picked up and just lost interest with immediately because the world just didn't seem conceivable. It needs to seem real before it can seem fantastical.
Yeah, because I think that's what separates it from reality. And if you're reading fantasy or sci-fi, there is a small part of you that wants to escape the hellscape that we're currently living in.
And yet dystopia is so popular.
That's what terrifies me. I've read more dystopia recently than I have in a long time, and I don't know if that's because yesterday was Brexit Day or not.
Oh, quite possibly. Initially, the post-apocalyptic event in my novel was never ever going to be referenced. It was going to be like the traditional vague, some wars from long ago that we know nothing about. And actually, I'm thinking, moving forward, I think I might mention how it happened and have it a little bit more linked to modern day politics, but maybe in a subtle way. Like, I haven't quite lined that one out.
That's fine. So do you know already, you don't have to tell me, but do you know how this trilogy is going to end?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I always know how something's going to end. The middle part, and I think it's again something that a lot of writers struggle with, is the middle, unless sure of. There's like a sequence of points where like, this needs to happen at some point, this is definitely going to happen, these two characters are going to do X, Y, and Z. But I always know where they're going to end up, and I think that's important.
Do you spend a lot of time planning your book before you start?
Yes and no. So there's a middle ground. So I think it's very important to have a plan to keep you on track, and the only way I get anything done is by having a plan. So it's definitely important to have this plan moving forward, but you've got to let some of it develop organically. And again, this is one of the tricks that I learned with this book that I perhaps didn't know as well in The Rose and the Thorn, which meant I spent so long writing it, is generally speaking, better to do it sequentially. Like, it might be you've got a really good idea for a scene later on, by all means, like, write out that dialogue if it's in your head, etc. But for the most part, for the characters to develop organic relationships, it makes sense to do it so sequentially, because otherwise you've got this gorgeous scene that you desperately want to put in your novel, and you will have to rearrange so many other things to make
Or kill your darlings.
or kill your darlings, just get rid of it entirely, because you didn't plan for it.
Yeah.
So absolutely have a plan. I said it's always the first part of the novel is really well planned, the end of the novel is well planned, and then the middle bit is just like, this has to happen, and this has to happen, and this has to happen, and the ending often ends up being rearranged.
Yeah. I find that I can plan until I'm blue in the face, but fundamentally the story is going to do what it wants to do, and I can restructure. So I've done it before where like I've written a chapter and then I've rewritten about 5 or 6 times, and I've either tweaked a certain decision or a certain bit in dialogue that kind of sends it off in these different shoots, and then I'll go, okay, well that one actually needs to happen because this is what is planned to happen in the next chapter, and sometimes it doesn't work. Like my story In the Shade was originally meant to be comedy. It wasn't meant to be this dark American Gothic werewolf story, and it was purely because I made up a joke, and I desperately tried to get the joke into the final draft that as is now, and one of my beta readers was just like, I love this joke, it's hilarious, it doesn't work in this book. And I was like, no! But because by that point it wasn't a comedy anymore.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and like I'd started off by ripping into werewolves, and by the end I was like, these werewolves are really cool. You can rip into them, but it's not going to work in the same. It's not going to be the same kind of humour. And I've still got that joke written at home, and I can't wait
to use it somewhere.
Yeah, use it somewhere else.
So there's this line from the trilogy, and it's not in the first book, and I'm like, but it has to be in there somewhere because I just love it so much. But it just didn't work with the like the climax at the end, where she's obviously having the bit of the monologue with the big bad evil. You know that's going on. I don't think that's a spoiler, and it just didn't work. This retour at that place, I was like, that needs to just sit here for a little bit. I will come back to you later.
Yeah, we'll deal with that later. Just put it in a box and kind of. So you wrote it, it took you 3 months to write it. Did you give yourself a break before you started editing?
Yes, absolutely, which is again something I learned from doing The Rose and the Thorn, which is I finished reading it, and I almost had, you know when you finish a book that you love reading so much, you want to read it all over again, like I did with the Cruel Prince. It was so good.
It's so good!
It's so good! And I kind of felt like that, like I just wanted to dive back in, but the problem was you don't notice, I mean you might notice some of the more clerical errors, like with grammar, etc., but you are not going to notice the bigger ones. So, for example, the Rose and Thorn, initially, she spent way longer sitting in her room moping at the start that, you know, she's been separated from her family, and I was like, this is boring.
Yeah.
Like, it would be realistic, sure, but it's boring to read. So, I was like, she can still be miserable, but she needs to get out and do something.
She needs to be outside and miserable.
Sorry?
Outside and miserable.
Yeah, she needs to be outside and miserable, and that's where all the moody, pathetic fallacy part comes in, which, you know, as I think
You're clearly a fan of the pathetic fallacy.
I love pathetic fallacy, it's one of my favourites.
It's a good technique.
It's a good one, yeah. And there were other things as well that changed, where, again, you've got like a beautiful scene that's just absolutely gorgeous, but you've got so many beautiful scenes that are absolutely gorgeous between the characters, and it just doesn't need that many.
It doesn't need all of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I really struggle to read literary fiction because I feel like literary fiction is just
that.
It's just a collection of beautiful scenes. There's very rarely a story behind it. Like, I was trying to explain to someone the other day the difference between like genre fiction and literary fiction. And I was like, genre fiction, all the conflict is outside, but they may respond to it internally, but they also have to respond to it externally. Whereas literary fiction, it's all internally. You could have an entire book where they're stood at the kitchen sink. And that's why I have an issue with it, because I'm like, yeah, it's a collection of really beautiful scenes and really beautiful feelings, but it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
If you've got a genre that you just wouldn't write?
Probably those two, to be honest, because I have to have a story. Absolutely have to have a story that's like driving me through. So those are ones that I sort of like actively avoid. I don't like, sorry Dad, military fiction. Like, I'm just not interested in a bunch of people killing each other. That was too much of my childhood watching, not literally too many people.
I guess if you get to a point where you're just like, no, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, like, it's very much old white men, isn't it? So
yes, it's always a white man.
Yeah, there's not much diversity there, and I'm all for more of that in modern literature.
That's fair.
Yeah, and to be honest, I know this is a terrible thing for an English teacher to say, but I don't like the classics.
How controversial. controversial.
I know, it's really controversial, and it's not that I don't think that they have something to offer, and I don't think that they're worthwhile, or I don't think they're good books. It's nothing to do with that. It's just our language has developed. And you know, if you're reading Dickens, I mean, Dickens didn't have an editor in the way that we have an editor, and you're just like, you could have trimmed Great Expectations down to about half this length with a good editor, Mr. Dickens.
I remember I felt like a really bad teacher, but I remember saying to my students, if they're trying to revise Great Expectations, to just read the first sentence and last sentence of every chapter, because the first sentence sets up what the chapter's going to be about, and the last sentence summarises it.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure what the chapter's about, that's the easiest way to do it.
And of course, that works with how Dickens was writing it, which was like, you know, the sort of serial form.
Yeah.
So yeah, there would be a summary at the end, be like, next time on Great Expectations.
Yeah. And I'm just like, yeah. And I think you're right, because I think, and I think it's kind of hard that we still have to teach, and also coming from a teacher that like, yeah, I enjoy the classics. I enjoy certain genres of the classics. So I love Gothic fiction because I feel like Gothic fiction is the great grandfather of fantasy, murder mystery, science fiction, thriller, and I think, but then we should be teaching those things, as opposed to just those. And I think, you know, the classics were written when books weren't readily available like they are now. You know, you've got graphic novels, you've got like ebooks, things that make reading more accessible, audiobooks for example, for people that struggle. And like they're almost, because we still hold on to classics and put them on a pedestal, everything else seems lower.
This is exactly my thinking, is that classics are put on too much of a pedestal, and I said, I do think they are valid, and I do think they're interesting. There's a reason we keep retelling them. I mean, I love Pride and Prejudice, and I will watch every goddamn TV, film adaptation, miniseries, all of them. But that's also the thing, those adaptations are still valid and they're still relevant. And if you look at, say, Little Women, and the most recent film of that, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's fantastic at bringing all of those themes that the author wanted to be there, but putting them under a modern lens. And I think people need to realise that, like, yeah, the classics don't necessarily need to be so high up on that pedestal, and that modern novels and modern literature is just as valid a way of telling a story.
Yeah.
And if I'm entirely honest, I'd love an abridged version of Great Expectations, because it's just too long. It's just too long.
Could you imagine? I mean, I do, I think there's certain books that I'm like, I don't know why we still teach this, but I'm not going to slander the classics here, because we haven't got the time.
Yeah.
So, if you could put one of your characters into a different story, which character would you pick, and which story would you choose? So you could literally, like, so taking them from a book that you've written to a book that you've read, where would you pick up and put down?
Ooh, that is a good one. Oh, that's such a big question. I mean, honestly, Ariel would be good taken from absolutely
For any story.
and she'd just be the little sass fairy that she is. So yeah, I'd quite like to see her in a classic. Like she'd be great in Pride and Prejudice.
She'd be. I mean, I think that what I like about her is I feel like she's got Lizzie's snark, but she's also got the father's wit, the way that she because she's not nasty, but she will just kind of, you know.
She's actually quite wise because she's much older than she looks, so she sort of sit back and she'd be watching like Lizzie and Darcy go on about this, and she'd be like, "You come on, guys, just kiss."
She'd be like,
just kiss.
Oh, like, and I think, I could almost imagine her being like, when they have their argument, and he's like, you know, like, your family's blah, 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 and she like gets all defensive. It's
Dude,
like,
really?
It's like, Lizzie, you know he's speaking the truth. He ain't no liar. Let's just calm their tempers down. She's actually mad because,
Yeah, and she just explains.
it'd be a much shorter book.
It would be so much shorter though. And again,
though,
that's the
I'd watch
thing.
it.
You need to see the character progression,
Yeah.
don't you? You can't just cut out all these middle bits.
I wrote an entire essay. This is how bad I got. I wrote an entire essay about Pride and Prejudice on how they are not opposites attract. I find
They're actually very similar.
They are incredibly similar. They are both incredibly stubborn, and they both are very loyal to their families. They have so much in common that I wrote an entire essay about it, because that for me is one trope that I'm like, I don't mind rivals to lovers or enemies to lovers, but the idea that opposites attract makes no sense to me or whatsoever.
Like, there obviously you can have some opposite elements, like you can have one that's super sporty and one that's super arty, but as people, you need to have those similarities. It doesn't work if one of you's really mean and one of you's really nice.
No. Not unless that mean character is nice to them. That is one of my favourite tropes. If we're talking about like tropes now that about me do and don't like, one of my favourites is when you've got grumpy person A who is only nice to happy person B. Like, that's one of my favourites.
That is quite cute, to be fair. I've seen that in like a lot of animes.
Yeah, that's probably why it is.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that. Well, thank you for having me.
Oh,
in
it's been
your
so
lovely
nice to be
home.
had.
And thanks for talking to me about your book.
I mean, anytime.
Literally any excuse.
Any excuse.
Any excuse. Where can people find you, and where, importantly, can they find your books?
So obviously, Amazon, Katherine MacDonald, The Rose and the Thorn, and coming soon, The Phoenix Project, Book 1. Obviously also on Goodreads and Twitter, my handle is Kate Mac Author.
I'll put all of those in the description below to
Thank
make
you
it nice
very
and
much.
easy for people to find. But I hope you had fun.
I really did.
This is the first author interview I've done for my YouTube. How cool is that?
How exciting.
So-
To be fair, I'd just be happy to just discuss books with you
Yeah,
in general.
I was here 2 weeks ago and we watched Chalet Girl, and
That's what we
just-
talked about.
Talk about Pride and Prejudice then too as well.
The fundamental problems with the classics and why we should just pull back from them ever so slightly.
Retell them, just
Retell
slightly
them,
better.
yes, just slightly better.
Okay, well, I hope you have a nice day.
Yes.
And I hope you have a nice day.
Have a nice day.